You were never the problem, but you were trained to believe you were. And that training, the one that happened so early you can't even remember learning it, is still running in the background of your life right now. Still shaping how you respond. Still deciding how much space you allow yourself to take up. Still whispering that your needs are secondary, that your comfort matters less, that the most valuable thing you can offer another person is your ability to make things easier for them. You didn't choose that belief. It was handed to you. Somewhere along the way, maybe in childhood. Maybe in a relationship that quietly dismantled you. Maybe in a family that confused emotional suppression with emotional maturity, you received a very clear message. Your emotions were too much. Your needs were inconvenient. And the fastest, safest, most effective way to be accepted was to become easier to handle. So, you adapted. That's what humans do when the environment demands it. They adapt. They reshape. They learn which version of themselves gets the warmest response, and they lead with that version. Every time. But here's the part. No one ever says out loud. That version of you that learned to be easy, to be calm, to be the one who understands, instead of the one who needs understanding, that version wasn't growth. It was survival. And there's a difference. A significant one. Because growth expands you. Survival shrinks you into whatever shape fits the container you're in. You became the person who reads the room. Not because it's your natural state. Because at some point, you understood, maybe without words, maybe just as a feeling in your body, that other people's emotional states were going to affect your world. So you needed to know what those states were before they arrived at your door. You developed a system. You watch tone. You watch silence. You notice when someone's energy is slightly off, even when their words say they're fine. You feel tension in a room that no one else has registered yet. You anticipate what someone needs before they know they need it. And then, quietly, efficiently, you move to address it. People call that empathy, and they mean it as a compliment. But let's be honest with each other for a moment. What you built isn't just empathy. Empathy is feeling with someone. What you built is an entire internal monitoring system, sophisticated, exhausting, constantly running, designed to track the emotional weather of the people around you so you can respond accordingly. That's not a gift. That's an adaptation to an environment that wasn't safe enough for you to simply exist in without monitoring. The romanticization of people like you is one of the quiet cruelties of the world. They say, you're so understanding. You're so emotionally intelligent. You just get people in a way most people don't. And you absorb those words. You let them define you. Because they're the closest thing to being valued that you've consistently received. Not valued for who you are, valued for what you do with who you are for other people. Nobody stops to ask, where did that come from? Nobody thinks to wonder, what did this person have to experience to become this fluent in other people's inner worlds? Because here's what's actually true. You didn't develop emotional intelligence because you were raised in an environment of warmth and reflection. You developed it because not understanding the emotional landscape around you felt dangerous. Because getting it wrong had consequences. Because learning to read people wasn't a skill you cultivated for pleasure. It was something closer to a survival mechanism that got so refined over time, it started to look like a superpower. And now you wear it like one. But underneath it, underneath all that capability is a person who learned to scan every room they walk into, who notices the micro-shift in someone's expression before their face fully changes, who absorbs other people's stress into their own body without even deciding to, who can sit with someone else's pain for hours and then go home and fall apart quietly, because there was nowhere in that entire interaction for your own experience to exist. You know, this. You've always known this. Here's where it starts to cost you in ways you stopped admitting a long time ago. You give. Consistently, reliably, sometimes exhaustingly, you give. You adjust yourself to what the moment needs. You make space, emotional space, mental space, sometimes physical space for people who never think to return the gesture. And you tell yourself that this is what caring looks like. But there's a word for what's actually happening, and it's not caring. It's overfunctioning. Caring is mutual. Overfunctioning is when you've unconsciously taken on the emotional weight of an entire relationship or an entire room and started carrying it as though that's simply your role. You overfunction because underfunctioning once felt catastrophic, because at some point you learned that when things fell apart, no one was coming to hold them together. So you became the person who holds things together, and you became so good at it that people stopped noticing you were doing it. They just noticed that things stayed together when you were around. And here's the thing that quietly hollows you out over time. You know everything about them. You know their history, their fears, the specific way they shut down when they feel criticized, the thing they need to hear when they're spiraling, the exact tone of voice that means they're about to cry, even when they're pretending they're fine. But they don't know you. Not really. They know the version of you that showed up for them, the capable version, the steady version, the version that always seemed to have enough to give. But the interior of you, the parts that are uncertain, that are tired, that are quietly desperate for someone to ask the right question and actually wait for the real answer, that part has been sitting in the dark for a very long time. And the worst part isn't that they don't see it. The worst part is that you've gotten so good at hiding it that you stopped seeing it yourself. You stopped asking, what do I actually feel right now? Not what does the situation need? Not what would be most helpful? Not what response will keep the peace? What do you feel? That question got buried so deep under years of attending to everyone else that pulling it back up feels almost foreign now, like trying to remember a language you once spoke fluently and haven't used in years. There's a specific point that every empath reaches. It doesn't arrive with noise. It doesn't look the way people expect it to look. There's no breakdown, no confrontation, no final conversation where everything gets said and the air clears. It arrives quietly, like a door closing in an empty house. One day, you realize you're not anxious about the relationship anymore. You're not running the usual mental calculations. What did that comment mean? Did I say something wrong? Are they okay? How do I fix this? The hypervigilance that used to run constantly in the background of every interaction has gone silent, and in that silence, which should feel like relief, there's something unfamiliar. Stillness, not peace, exactly. Not yet, but something that rhymes with it. People around you will sometimes mistake this for sadness. They'll think you've shut down. They'll call it being distant, or closed off or cold. It isn't any of those things. What they're actually watching is a person who has finally, after a very long time, stopped overriding their own perception for the sake of someone else's comfort. You see, for years you knew things. You knew when someone wasn't being fully honest with you. You knew when the dynamic had shifted and not in a good direction. You knew when the effort had become one-sided, and the distance between what this person offered and what you deserved had grown too wide to keep ignoring. You knew all of it, and you stayed anyway, not because you couldn't see it, but because you could see them, the potential of them, the struggling human underneath the behavior, and you chose, consciously, to extend more grace, more time, more chances than the evidence warranted. That's not naivety. That's actually one of the most generous things a person can do, but there's a limit. And the limit isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives one day, like a quiet fact you can no longer argue with. And once it arrives, everything changes. Now here's what the people who broke you fundamentally misunderstood. They misread the whole situation from the beginning. They looked at your patience and concluded there was no limit to it. They looked at your understanding and decided it meant you would always find a way to justify their behavior. They looked at your consistency, the way you kept showing up, kept trying, kept finding room for generosity. And they made a very specific error in judgment. They confused your choice to stay with an inability to leave. And that confusion is what broke them in the end, because what they never grasped is this. You weren't staying because you needed them. You were staying because you had decided to. Every single day, with full awareness of their flaws, of the imbalance, of the ways the relationship quietly diminished. You were making an active decision to remain. That decision had weight, it had depth, and it could be unmade. What they also failed to understand is that underneath, all that softness underneath all that, warmth and patience and willingness to extend the benefit of the doubt you were watching. The same mechanism that made you so attuned to other people's needs also made you extraordinarily accurate at reading their patterns. You noticed the inconsistencies, the small moments where what they said didn't match what they did, the times they were present for you only when it was convenient, the subtle ways